Third graders, welcome back. We are going to be continuing on our readings for conflict and compromise. We are on week 3 of Studies Weekly. If there's ever a time that you want to go back and reread these, you are welcome to log into your Studies Weekly account and you can go and read any of the articles that we have already covered for the week, for this week or past weeks. We're going to continue on with consensus and compromise today. Say consensus. Good. Now say compromise. Great. I want you to take a second and look at these pictures here. This is compromise, and this one, where the students have their hands raised, is consensus. Think about it for a second. Do you know the difference between these two words? Compromise and consensus. Give you a couple seconds to think. If you want to take a little longer, pause the video. All right, we're going to move on here, and you can see that there is a difference between those pictures, and we're going to talk about what that is today. So I'm going to start at the top here. You can follow along as I read. Consensus is when most people in a group have the same opinion, or when they agree to the same solution. People often have different opinions about how to solve a problem. It's hard to agree on a solution. When we can't agree, we have to come to a compromise. When we compromise, we change our thinking about a solution. In a compromise, everyone gives up something to create a solution. When we compromise, we think about the common good, not just about what we want. So think about that for a second. We've been talking a lot about compromise this week. Compromise could be between you and maybe one other person. It can also be between large groups. But let's think of it, if you and a friend at school or a sibling at home, if you come to a disagreement on something, for example, yesterday I used video games. If you both want to play that video game at the same exact time, and it's a one-player game, you both can't do that at the same time. You both want to. You both have that want to play those video games, but you can't both do it at the same time. You have to come up with a compromise. So some of the examples I said yesterday was you could each set a timer and one person gets 30 minutes to play. When their time is up, the next person gets 30 minutes to play. Or you could compromise and say, maybe we can just play a 2-player game, and then we can both play together at the same time. You're making a compromise because this is not exactly what either of you wanted. You each wanted to play that 1-player game by yourself. But you have to compromise because you have to give a little bit to be able to come up with a solution to your problem. So that's compromise. Now our new word for today is consensus. So I want to look back at our reading here. It says consensus is when most people in a group have the same opinion or when they agree to the same solution. People often have different opinions about how to solve a problem. It's hard to agree on a solution. So a consensus, if you look at this picture here, all those kids have their hands raised except a couple. I see a little boy in the corner whose hand is not raised. So maybe he doesn't agree with this consensus, but the majority of people do. So because of that, that is the agreement that has been made. So let me give you an example of this. If you are sitting in the classroom and your teacher says, okay, we get to watch a movie today. We are going to either watch Finding Nemo or we are going to watch Toy Story. So first, raise your hand if you want to watch Finding Nemo. And then raise your hand if you want to watch Toy Story. Whichever movie had the most hands, your class has come to a consensus. Maybe the majority of the class, so most of your class, wants to watch Finding Nemo. If the majority of students had their hands raised for that movie, that is a consensus that the class has come to, that they want to watch Finding Nemo. There might be 2 or 3 students who wanted to watch Toy Story and they raised their hand for that. But because most of the class raised their hand for Finding Nemo, that is what the class will do. So in a group, when people have the same opinions, they can agree to that same solution. All right, after you watch this video, you are going to be completing a consensus and compromise work page. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like here in my Notability. So this is your work page here. It's called Consensus and Compromise. I will read the directions for you. Compromise and consensus are two ways to resolve conflict. Can you think of examples in your life when you've had to compromise or come to a consensus? Write your example in the boxes below. At the bottom of the page, think of a time when people in a community have compromised or come to a consensus about conflict. So let's start with these two boxes here. I'm going to start with consensus. Thinking about my life, let's see. When have I had to come to a consensus with a group of people in my life? I'm going to think back to when I was younger and I was living at home with my family. I had a pretty big family. There's 6 of us in our family. So I'm going to use the example of getting pizza. We would have pizza a lot in my house, and we always had to come up with a consensus of what kind of pizza we wanted. So I would write, oops, I still spelled that word wrong. There we go. About which kind of pizza we wanted. So how we did it in my house, we would take maybe 2 toppings that we would want. So for example, pepperoni or sausage. And then we would all have to say, okay, I want pepperoni or I want sausage. And whichever one came up with the most, that was the consensus that we were going with that one. So maybe I had 4 people in my family say that we want pepperoni and only 2 people wanted sausage. Which topping would we decide to get on our pizza? We would go with pepperoni because the consensus was that the majority of my family wanted pepperoni. So my family would come to a consensus about what kind of pizza we wanted. We had to agree on which topping we wanted by coming to a consensus. So that's one example. I want you to do at least 2 examples here. So my first one, that is my first example, and then I would like you to come up with your second example as well. Please don't use my same example. Try to change it up a little bit and come up with your own. So next would be compromise. You're going to come up with a compromise that you have had to make in your life. Maybe it's at school or maybe it's at home. So again, I would like you to do 2 in this box. So maybe a compromise that I have made is I really wanted to go to the beach when I was younger, but I also had maybe homework to do. So in order to go to the beach, my compromise with my parents was that I would finish all my homework and then I would get to go to the beach. That was a compromise because it also motivated me to get my homework done. So compromise. I wanted to go to the beach all day. I had homework though. So my compromise was to complete my homework before going to the beach. I was still able to go to the beach for half of the day. So that's my first example there, and you will also come up with your second example for compromise. When you're done with that, you are going to pick something in your community that you have seen that is a consensus or a compromise. You don't have to do both unless you want to, but you're going to start by making your text box, and then you can just pick which one. So maybe, for example, I want to go with consensus. All right, so if I see something in my community, oops, there we go, that is a consensus, I'm going to title it with consensus so I know what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to make it number 1. So So this is my first idea. So then I have to think to my community. What is a consensus that my community might have had to come to an agreement about? Okay, so maybe there is a town hall meeting about creating a new park in our community. And at the town hall meeting, they have a vote of either yes, we're going to build a new park in our community, or no, we're not going to build a new park in the community. My town hall members might vote, and if the majority says yes, then we could have a community park. And if the majority says no, then we won't. So for my example here, I'm going to say, in a town hall meeting, my community members voted to build a new park. There were 10 people who voted yes to the park. There were 2 people who voted no to the park. The consensus was that we would build a new park. Oops, sorry guys, I'm going too fast for myself right now. That would be my consensus. All right, so you can pick either to write about consensus or you could write about compromise, whichever one. If you want to do both, awesome. Maybe I want to do both right here and I could do another example, but I'm only asking you to give me one. And please give me at least 3 sentences here, okay? Give me at least 3 sentences here. Remember, at the top, you need at least 2 examples, and those should each have probably at least 2 sentences as well. It's hard to explain your consensus or compromise without at least 2 sentences. So do your best to really push yourself to write a little more for these examples, okay? I hope this video helped. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your teachers. Have a great day, everyone.